All right. Welcome. Thank you for being here on a Thursday morning before Labor Day, so very much appreciate it. I'm Stephen Collins. I'm the CEO of Matter. This is a program called Care for Our World. It's exploring really the intersection of climate change and health equity. We've not done a lot of programs like this. We were very excited to dig into this topic. It's been an interesting week in the area of climate change, just looking at what's happening in Pakistan and the floods, and there are obviously tremendous public health implications to that. There are also public health implications to the day-to-day business of healthcare and the day-to-day experiences of so many people in the United States as well as around the world. And so that's what we really want to dig into. We are doing this together with our partner Loyola University of Chicago, which we've been very fortunate and grateful to be able to work with in different capacities for a few years. We've gotten to know the way that they approach their work, and one of the things that we appreciate and always appreciate from our vantage point when we're working with academia is that in many ways they have a practical lens to it. It's not all about the research. It's not all about the academics, although obviously those things are important. It's also about the practical implications and the implications to the real world of the work that they're doing and the science that they're doing and the studies and the policies that they are focused on. So we will explore all of that in the context of health equity and climate change. I will give you the 60-second overview of Matter for those of you who aren't familiar and those of you who are in the room and you're wondering, what is this place that I just walked into? We are a healthcare technology incubator and innovation hub. We opened in 2015 with a mission to accelerate the pace of change of healthcare. We do three things in service of our mission. So first, we incubate startup companies. We've worked with about 750 startups since we started up ourselves. In 2015, they ranged from 1 or 2 person companies just getting started to companies with 100 or even 200 people that are scaling into the market. They are every type of technology, every aspect of health and the business of healthcare, and we have a suite of services to help them at every stage of development. Second thing we do is work with big organizations, lots of life sciences companies and health systems and insurance companies and technology companies, companies that want to harness innovation to improve health, and we help them do that more effectively. We will help them find value in the emerging technologies that entrepreneurs are developing. We'll help them unlock the potential of their internal innovators, and we'll help them build system-level collaborations across the healthcare industry. And the third thing we do is we are a nexus for the healthcare community, for people who are passionate about healthcare innovation and healthcare transformation. And we do programs like this, where we bring people together. We identify topics that we think are particularly interesting and relevant and timely, and try to put together a group of experts with differing perspectives to share their perspectives and get underneath the surface a bit. And so that's what we're going to try to do today. We have 3 wonderful people joining us. So Holly Copeland works at Horizon Therapeutics, which she will talk more about if you're not familiar with them. It's one of the 21st century?
Yes.
Chicago areas, yeah, whatever we are. This century's greatest life sciences success stories coming out of the Midwest. So she'll talk a little bit about that, and she oversees a variety of functions, including sustainability for the company. We have Dean Elaine Morato, who leads the Parkinson School of Public Health and Health Sciences at Loyola University. And we have Dean Tuckman, who is leading the School of Environmental Sustainability at Loyola. So with that, I will sit down and we'll get started. If you have questions for the panel, whether you're in the room or whether you are watching virtually, go to matter.socialqa.com, and I will see those questions that you put in. You'll be able to see other people's questions. You can decide which ones you're most excited about, and I'll weave them into the conversation as appropriate. So with that, Dean Tuckman, Nancy, thank you for joining us. And so can you tell us a little more about the School of Environmental Sustainability, the way that you approach your work, particularly in the context of public health? In short, why are you here, focusing on in part on health equity, and how do you think about that in the context of what it is that you do?
Thank you, Stephen. It's nice to be here. I am the dean of it's a new School of Environmental Sustainability. We opened in 2020. We're a very interdisciplinary school because we look at all of these big, vexing social problems of the 21st century that are really interdisciplinary. They require people's thinking about not just the environment, but also thinking about the economy, businesses, public health, looking at the humanistic side of it as well. So there's a lot of social and kind of basic science that have to be pulled together to be able to holistically look at these questions. And so we're a very interdisciplinary faculty, and public health is a very important issue to us. It's one of our hallmark areas of interest. We have 5 areas under the big umbrella of environmental sustainability that we're concerned about and that we have acute faculty expertise in. One is environmental health. And we collaborate with Elaine in the Parkinson School of Health Sciences and Public Health, and their faculty work with our faculty developing programs. We have one that's called environmental health. So students who are studying environmental science want to apply their work to public health because we know that the degradation of the environment has direct impact on human health, and it disproportionately impacts people who are poor or vulnerable or somehow marginalized. So that's a very Jesuit thing, looking at social justice, looking at health equities, and how climate change is a driver of health inequities.
Thank you. And just since it's so new, just 2 years old as a school, what was the genesis of creating a separate school at Loyola to focus on this? And could we say that public health had anything to do with that as a driver of really wanting to affect more change and do more work in that area?
Absolutely. In fact, we sort of started the whole idea of environmental sustainability on our campus 20 years ago in 2002, when we weren't even really recycling. So the idea was we really got to reduce our own environmental footprint on campus, and we have to integrate this thinking into our curriculum. And so for the past 20 years, we've been really investing in making our campus more environmentally sustainable. We're constantly ranked in the top 5% of green campuses in the country, and we're pretty proud of that, and we keep hanging on to that even though other schools are meeting us, which is really exciting. But I would say because we are a Jesuit university that's very humanistic looking and always caring about humans, that is what really got our cabinet, our board, our president excited about environmental sustainability. They weren't as interested in certain species going extinct, which I worry about, but they were like, okay, so we don't really care about the darter or some little fish, but humans. And so I think once it was very clear that the degradation of the environment with long periods of drought, long periods of flooding, these things are directly impacting human and human health, that's when everybody got on board, and there was a tremendous buy-in, and a decision was made to really make this a pillar of the university.
Yeah. That is terrific and helps explain the synergies and some of the relationships. So Elaine, from your point of view, and part of this, please also share a little bit about the Parkinson School, which isn't really that old in and of itself. So right. A lot of changes and exciting developments at Loyola over the last decade. A little bit about the school and how you approach it, and also how you think about climate change and the environment in the context of public health and the work that you are doing at the school.
Yep. So the Parkinson School of Health Sciences and Public Health, in its very name, is seeking interdisciplinary and taking a systems-based view on health. It's not just public health, it's not just healthcare, but if we're going to try to address some of these very large problems in health, we've got to be working across sectors and groups of people. And so that is the lens by which we, very similarly to what Nancy was just saying, bring a humanistic, holistic approach to issues that relate to human health. And so I like to always quote the World Health Organization when it was founded in right after World War II, and they say the highest attainable standard of health is a fundamental right of every human being. And it brings a social justice lens to what gathers us to be addressing these important health problems. And the environment is where we live and work and breathe and eat, and those affect our human health as well. So when we think about health equity at the intersection with environment, one way to think of it is a model that's often called One Health. Our human health is integrated with our environment, the world where we are, and also animal health, and we all live on one planet. And how the environment and climate is impacting animals, food sources, floods, as you were mentioning, impact and intersect with human health. So if we want to be growing up the next new leaders to address human health problems, we've got to be also people who are literate and multilingual in issues that relate to environmental health too.
And do you, so the concept of social determinants of health has become something that I think people in the world of health and healthcare have talked a lot about over the last 5, 10. I'm sure that there's parts that have been talking about it for much longer than that, but at least in that configuration, it's a relatively new thing, and the implications of social determinants on health are, I don't want to go too far, but almost front and center for healthcare organizations and healthcare institutions almost universally. Yeah. I'm wondering just how much of that has sort of shaped the view that you bring to the Parkinson School?
Great question. Healthy People 2030, its main theme is around social determinants of health. So we've had Healthy People 2000, 2010, 2020, and we talked about health disparities, but as you were noting, this is the first time where we're really thinking about social determinants of health. And what are social determinants? It's where we live, where we grow, where we learn, where we worship, where we die. All of the social environment, the built environment, as well as economic environment, education environment, these are stronger determinants of health and our access to good health than just are we able to have a nice hospital that can do care. And so there's, with that rise of recognition that it's the social determinants of health that are really affecting us, it means that we've got to be working in a cross-sectoral way with businesses, because that's where people are getting health, with schools, because that's where people are getting health, with environment and built environment. And so I think it's a recognition that we have to be interdisciplinary, again, if we are really to work together on solving some of these social impacts that affect our health.
Yeah. Holly, you work for Horizon Therapeutics. In your answer, please do share a little bit about the company. And again, just as an aside, the company, I can't remember exactly when it started, but when we first opened Matter in early 2015, the CEO was one of our founding chair of the board, and was very active in helping get Matter up and running. And I remember when I introduced him at our opening, talking about the size of the company. It was like a few hundred people, and they, I think, had 1 or maybe 2 products that they were had on market. And so Holly will give an update on what has really happened, and this is why I said it's really one of the if not the premier, one of the premier success stories of life sciences in the Midwest over the last 21st century. So in addition to that, Holly, can you explain, just from your perspective, again, it's sort of the question, like, what are you doing on this discussion? This isn't a discussion about drug development or things like that. This is a discussion about public health. It's a discussion about climate change, a discussion about health equity. From your seat, how does Horizon look at these issues and view its role in the world in helping to address some of the challenges?
Sure. Well, thank you. So I'll start by sharing a bit about Horizon. We're now a global biotechnology company focused on rare and rheumatic diseases. As Stephen mentioned, not too long ago, we were focused on a couple of primary care products. And our founding CEO, Tim Walbert, has successfully grown the company from those early days to now, depending on the day, a stock value hovering around $20 billion, and 11 medicines in our portfolio now, offices all around the world, and 2,000 plus employees. So it's been a wild ride, very quick, but a true gem in entrepreneurial success and story. And from my vantage point where I sit in the organization, I have the pleasure of sharing kind of a unique element of our success story, which is really the intention of Tim to integrate purpose and meaning into the foundation of the company before we were profitable. And as a public company, also kind of a unique situation because you have demands and expectations from shareholders that oftentimes create friction when it comes to investing in areas that don't lead to profitability. And what's unique about this is his vision and understanding that there was a lot of value in culture building, recruiting the right kind of talent, and understanding your obligation as a successful business and supporting your community to invest in those areas of community despite those pressures of being a public company. So I'm really excited to kind of share more about that journey and what makes it unique today in the comments. But when we think about environmental sustainability and the impacts or the intersection with health equity, the way that we think about it is really twofold. There's an operational approach, so thinking about your business operations and how your environmental footprint affects the communities in which you live and work. And then separately, there's also the ability to have an impact through the way that you spend your money. So when we think about our philanthropic approach, organizations that we're supporting, when we go into a community, how are we showing up for that community and investing in ways that could lead to innovation or creative problem solving around environmental sustainability. So as we've been mentioning, it's evolved even within the 8 years that I've been at Horizon from a conversation where you had subject matter experts that were really driving the conversation to now evolving into a truly cross-functional purpose for the organization, given the rise in ESG and the focus of investors and a variety of actors across the business to care about these issues and try to understand how we can pull these themes across the business and not have them siloed. So it's actually a really exciting time to be having these conversations and so many opportunities for innovation to occur in those blank spaces.
There's one example we were talking about the other day that I think is interesting. You mentioned obviously your own operations, and that's something that many, if not most, and hopefully all organizations that are in some aspect of healthcare are thinking about, and the environmental implications of their own operations and their own, which is a fairly broad concept. And then there's also how it is that you marshal your resources, who you partner with in order to affect change in the world. And you had a really interesting example that I thought that was, and obviously I'll let you share it, but it was in Africa, and it was an example of where it sounds like it was really a partnership and helping to create something new that hadn't sort of happened before.
Absolutely. So that's one of our unique approaches with philanthropy that I'm really proud of, which is we always like to inject this entrepreneurial methodology to the new partnerships that we engage in. And so in this case, UNICEF actually had a new program in Africa that checks a multitude of boxes when it comes to community development, sustainable development. And the intention was to solve the problem of plastic waste. So in some economies, there's a heavy reliance on single-use plastic, and without the infrastructure to support the recycling or the disposal of that waste, it tends to kind of overtake an environment. And so recognizing that the program that they piloted and we've been, had the honor of investing in, involves employing women to collect this trash and then taking it to a manufacturing facility that was built, it's in Côte d'Ivoire in Africa. And then once that plastic waste is brought to the manufacturing site, local employees convert that into dense bricks. And those dense bricks are then used to build schools, which there is also a need for new construction for schools. And so the support that we're extending allows the bricks to be used to build schools. So it's just a really interesting approach to this idea of circularity. How can we address community level problems in environmental sustainability in creative ways that also create jobs for marginalized communities and address other societal issues like the need for education?
I love that example. It must have been a lot of fun and very rewarding to be able to help put that together and see it in action. So Elaine and Nancy, I'll turn it back to you and really pose again a sort of a higher order question, which is, we hear a lot about climate change. It's in the news every day in some way or another. This week the devastation is in Pakistan and so much of the country's underwater, and there are obvious public health implications to that. But in general, is it getting worse? And if so, do you see in the work that you're doing the public health implications of climate change being exacerbated or getting worse than they were when you first started looking at these issues? And whoever wants to.
I'll let Nancy say, is it getting worse?
Yes, of course it's getting worse. We're very close to the precipice of not being able to support life on the planet. We have a very small window to get off of fossil fuels, else we will be in a constant state of emergency with floods and droughts and wildfires and all sorts of hurricanes, typhoons. That's what all of our energy and resources will be going towards, is just emergency management. We have the technology, we have the understanding of how to get off of fossil fuels so that we don't continue to drive ourselves sort of over the edge. We just aren't implementing the will. And I think that's what's the most frustrating thing, is that we can do it, and we just aren't doing it. But what gives me hope is that we do a lot of work on, in businesses, in universities, in cities. And I think it's going to be a groundswell. It's already become a groundswell. We can see people wanting to purchase things from companies that are really towing the line on environmental sustainability. There's whole aisles and whole grocery stores that are looking at organically and regeneratively grown food and crops. So I think we're in a really good pendulum swing towards really paying attention to it and hunkering down and addressing these issues. And I'm really excited about the new act that just became a bill, the IRA that just became a bill from the federal government that puts millions of dollars towards climate change, towards getting us off of fossil fuels, helping us to move into a clean energy environment that really will be a game changer, I think, for human health, for prosperity, for well-being, for international relations, for peace and prosperity in general. This is a global issue. Nobody is going to be able to dodge the bullet, and so I think we're seeing, especially in Northern Europe and Scandinavia, they've been paying attention to this and really planning and shifting off of fossil fuels for years, and so we know how to do it. We just have to get there.
Yeah. I think, Nancy, you raise a really important thing. In public health, we talk about how do you get public health action. It's when you're at the intersection of the science, but also political and social will.
Yeah.
And so I think the science community has been talking about these things for quite some time. And in a way that it's more than just temperature change. I think a lot around climate change was framed about, okay, the temperature is getting a certain degree warmer. That's hard to be excited about until you start to see what's the impact of that on a global level and how that relates to weather, superstorms, droughts, and now you start to see the impacts at a much greater level. I know we were talking earlier, reading in the news that they're predicting if the Greenland, ice sheet, starts to melt, that you might see ocean rise by 1 to 3 feet. I was visiting in San Francisco, and they had a model at their science museum there. 1 to 3 feet means that the San Francisco airport will be underwater. I think the vast majority of the US economic environment is on shoreline of some type, right? So the political and social will is going to have to deal with the reality. I think, as Nancy is saying, I think what gives us hope is having conversations like this with health entrepreneurs, people that are going to say, all right, here's a problem we need to solve. We need to find out an economic way to solve it and to sustain it. And now it's not a theoretical, but that unleashes a lot of creative energy. I think the other piece that brings a lot of, I think, hope is the rising Gen Z generation, and that this is very, very important. And with that, you're now going to see a whole generation of social will that I think is going to bring energy to this problem in a way that maybe the older generations were focused on some other problems and may not have kept their attention to it as closely as that they should have.
So you mentioned economics, something to that effect in your answer. So one of the possible challenges, and I'll throw it back to you, is that from a healthcare point of view, the healthcare system, whether it's life sciences companies or health systems or insurance, they generally have an overarching goal of trying to help people be healthier. The economic incentives and the structure of the system don't align with that, nor don't think do they align with, let's help whether it's bigger businesses or entrepreneurs, develop solutions that can target the inequitable implications of climate change. Is that something that, how are we going to overcome that? Is that something that you spend time looking at?
Right. So if I hear you right, we may have the heart or the interest in doing it, but the economic incentives aren't necessarily one that would to align. Is that right? So that's where we hope we have more companies like yours, in which being a good company means you're a corporate citizen. Your employees work in an environment, and I think in order to ensure the health of your workforce, you're going to have to ensure the health of where that workforce lives. Have we reached a tipping point where that is all economically flowing through? I probably not. You would know more on that. I think that's part of the challenges, and that's why we're so excited to be partnered here today. How do we stimulate a next generation of entrepreneurs that are trying to do the social good, but also we are a market society and we have to turn a return on investment. I've been struck with a number of companies, maybe some of them not necessarily in health, they're finding ways, either whether it's, turning plastic to shoes, or if you buy these socks, I'll give 10% to something else. There are companies who are coming up with business models that are trying to give back. And how do we, I guess maybe I flip the question to you. How should we best incentivize the private sector to go after these problems?
I'm just the moderator here. So.
I actually, in the time that I've been at Horizon, which is 8 years, my colleagues in the investor relations team have shared that they went from a time when investors did not mention ESG at all to now almost every single investor meeting, there's a question about ESG, if not multiple questions. So there's been this change in the paradigm of what is important from the long-term sustainability of a business. And when you have the investor community at large understanding that some of these issues affect the ability of a global company to fulfill their supply chain requirements, right? Like then you can start to understand how it really affects the business in a way. And so there are all these levers, that intersection of international political economy, right, that drive decision making. I think it's the bottom-up pressure of the workforce, it's the top-down pressure from the investor community, it's the governmental landscape trying to dabble in this space and see what works at the societal level. It's educating folks to understand what the problems are and how we solve them. And once everyone is kind of aligned, hopefully we can kind of shift the tide and move the ship in the right direction. But it's a coordinated effort, I would say.
So in an idealized world, a company like Horizon would look at what it does and its responsibility. It would be fully, net carbon neutral. It would the various medicines that you have developed and that you manufacture and distribute and produce, you would ensure that they're available to anyone regardless of their insurance or their access to quality health care. And what are the barriers to actually accomplishing that? Because it's easy to talk about, and I think every company is in various states of moving in that direction, but there are some structural and systemic and some real challenges that the healthcare system brings to bear on a company that wants to do that.
This is the exact question that got me really excited to participate in this panel, because you're right. I think the intention is there. You've got so many companies now that are committing to net zero by 2030, net zero by 2050, and that is great. But when you sit down with folks and you say, well, how the hell are you going to do that? Like, people are like, I have no idea, right? Like, there are general ideas, but it's really challenging to actionize these ideas. And so I feel like we don't really know quite yet what those solutions are, but the next generation that's learning about these problems in school are hopefully going to be the innovators that come in and create solutions for all of us. One example I'll share just from a healthcare perspective that we've talked about is when you think about your product, right? Like, there are all these issues around compliance and safety, single-use plastics, prescription bottles. Like, how do you reuse and recycle all that waste in a way that protects patients and also protects the company, right? It's a very challenging situation. So having some sort of innovation or entrepreneur that comes up with a solution that can work could have a tremendous impact on the operations of a healthcare company.
So Elaine, when you look out at the landscape of healthcare, at least in the United States, as a place to start, and you look at all the health systems and how it is that they operate and what it is that they're doing, and you look at all the insurance companies and that structure, and just the structure of how it is that we operate and deliver healthcare in the United States. And then you look at the public health challenges and the inequities in the system, and particularly with a climate lens on it, so those things are getting worse. Some aspects of that are getting worse. What changes do you think need to happen? In order to get to a more idealized
State
future, because I don't believe in utopias, but in that direction, what needs to happen?
What needs to happen? Well, I think you're identifying that in the US and elsewhere in the world, health and healthcare is a very complex ecosystem, if you will, made up of private, public, variety of settings, and these are challenging, complex problems. So I'll start with that. I like to think of this as a problem, as you were saying, a diffusion of innovation problem. And in diffusion of innovation, we know that there will be innovators who are coming up with those ideas and solutions, and people might not quite understand them. They might sound a little wacky and a little out there, but there will be those that are early adopters, adapt it, and they become the role models. And how do we create an environment that allows that fostering of that innovation so that once those innovators come in, and provide a solution, then there's a natural diffusion process. Suddenly it's now sexy to do that same thing. So if you think about cars, did we ever think that we wouldn't have horses? Horse-drawn carriage. I mean, there was a whole industry around horses, right? And cars were seen as, well, isn't that novel? And we're going to need gas stations, we're going to need roads, we're going to need a whole bunch of things. And people found a way and reached a tipping point. And so now we're in a society that's largely based on cars, and now we're trying to convert from gas cars to electric. So I don't think that the solutions happen overnight, but I think it's by fostering what, the innovator's dilemma is the fact that those that are making the money right now are the ones that are not necessarily incentivized to go after the new innovation. And so that new innovation is going to come on the fringe, but if it finds the right solution, it will take over, and then everything else will be adapting. So maybe that's not giving you the simple answer, but I kind of believe in the larger, that's what makes the world great, is that we're a place that allows innovation to try it out and to foster it. And places like here are trying to be incubators for those next new ideas.
Well, it's healthcare, so I don't believe in simple answers either. So
Yeah.
I think I think it's a great perspective. Nancy, one of the things we're going to talk a little bit more about later is the program that we're running together, which is really looking for entrepreneurs who are focused on this intersection of climate change and health equity. And I'm wondering, you have a lens that's broader than just healthcare. You have a lens across looking at climate change and environmental sustainability across a variety of industries and entrepreneurs and large companies and all. Have you seen anything that works particularly well, either inside of or outside of healthcare, where it's a model for encouraging innovation and encouraging progress against environmental related goals that you think, well, I'll cut it there, but I'm guessing that whatever example you come up with probably isn't in healthcare, so maybe it's something we can learn from and try to port over into this realm.
Yeah, Patagonia kind of jumps out as a really great model of how to build a culture within an organization around a value. I think the number is something like 10,000 people in line waiting to get a job at Patagonia, and they're willing to go in and be the janitor just so that they can get in and be part of something bigger that they really believe in and they feel is doing good. And I think really that's where Gen Z is. I think that's where a lot of generations are. They want to do work. They want their life's work to have more meaning than just making money or being successful in a monetary way. They want to give back. And we really find that with our students, but also with our faculty and staff. So I would say organizations like Patagonia that make great products, but they keep innovating inside their organization of how can we use plastic to make a new sweatshirt, and how can then we recycle that and people are done with it. We want it back so that we can either fix it and sell it again. It's all about the circular economy, and they're really innovative. They just keep doing more and more. I think that inspires people. I think it works. I think a big part of their success is culture. And the old adage that culture eats strategy for breakfast. You can have a great strategic plan, but if people aren't really behind it and they don't really believe in the organization or what the value of the organization is or its mission, the strategy really won't be implemented well, or it may not fail, but it'll kind of limp along. If you can develop a culture and get people that really believe in what you're doing, more than the bottom line, I think you have something there. And I really think that's what's helping to, move the needle.
So what's very interesting to me about what you just said in your answer is that the things that you didn't say. You didn't say, here's this model where we penalize companies that produce too much waste, and there may be places for all of these kinds of things. But that isn't where you focused. You didn't say the flip side, like here's some carrots or here's some incentives if a company goes down this road. What you said was in many ways more fundamental to that. It's about, because as a company, whether it's a health system or whether it's an insurance or life science, it's a collection of people who have to be motivated to do certain things and to work really hard in order to excel. And what you just described with Patagonia and then kind of beyond that is a model that could really translate to any organization, because every organization needs to attract amazing people, motivate them to do their best, not pay them in ridiculously inflated salaries in order to do that. And Holly, I'm wondering from your perspective, is that part of what you see at Horizon? And if extrapolating forward, but also drawing from your history backwards, you've been at the company for 8 years. It's a very entrepreneurial company that didn't, it started, whatever it is, 12 years ago, something in that neighborhood. It's not like this is a 150-year-old company. It was a startup not terribly long ago. And what you said at the beginning was that Tim, the CEO, really built a set of values into the fabric of the company from the very beginning. And so I'm wondering how you see that playing out today and how you see that maybe as a model for, as we're looking at entrepreneurs in the healthcare realm, we're looking at health equity and the intersection with climate change, is how relevant that might be.
Absolutely. I was thinking that we could validate the point that you just made entirely because of the vision of Tim to integrate this into the foundation of the company has led to all kind of rewards across the board, but I'll just talk about recruitment and retention as a starting point. So as a startup, there's this need for recruiting talent, and you don't have resources, and so you're really trying to sell individuals on like the passion of the mission to get them on board, and maybe there's an exchange of equity or some kind of relationship, but if you're able to sort of speak to their core about what drives them and to ensure that that's going to be integrated into the foundation of the business, the ability to then attract that kind of talent is just going to be easier. So we have had feedback from our interviews with our HR team when they've met with C-suite executives all the way down to entry-level employees. People have consistently said that regardless of what their skill set is or their subject matter expertise, they were drawn to Horizon because of how we show up in our communities, and they want to be a part of a culture like that. So it has been incredibly helpful in recruiting the kind of talent that further fuels that kind of a mission. I will say too, we've been very vocal internally about, regardless of where you sit in the organization, there's always an opportunity to give back and to helping our employees from finance to facilities to HR across the board to really kind of understand their own agency in supporting the community, and that has also fueled this culture that has ultimately led to this really wonderful place to work. Just mentioned yesterday, People Magazine actually named us to their top 50 companies that care list for the 4th time, and I'm so proud of that accomplishment, because when you look at the other companies on the list, right, these are huge multinational companies with foundations and endowments, and they spend a lot, right? And so there's like this high brand recognition that probably helps fuel their advancement on this list. Whereas in our case, we're a relatively younger company, and we're known within certain sectors, but we're not known universally. We're in the rare disease space, right? But for us to be named to that list and stand shoulder to shoulder, I think it speaks to the authenticity of how we approach this. And this is something that can be replicated by any other startup if you kind of ingrain this in the foundation.
Thank you.
So that's a great example of when I was talking about social modeling and having innovators step forward and emerge, and then it becomes something others aspire to. And it really sets a standard. I'm really struck by that.
So I'm going to ask Merle Thomas to come up and share a little bit more about the program that Matter and Loyola have put together to really focus on stimulating and working with and accelerating the trajectory of entrepreneurs that are operating at exactly this Intersection. But first, I just want to say thank you to all of you. You each brought different and relevant and interesting and complementary perspective to this conversation that I think was the intention, and hopefully we accomplished that intention. But Nancy and Elaine and Holly, thank you so much for joining us. And Merle Thomas, who's the center administrator at the Parkinson School, is going to come up now and again share a little bit more information about the health equity quest that Matter and Loyola have launched. So, Merle, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you.
All right, well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, whether you are here in person or you are joining us via live stream. I am super excited to get us kick-started for our Innovation Challenge this year, and to be able to partner with Matter as an organization formally for this year's challenge. And so as you see behind me, our challenge for our theme for this year is the 2020 Loyola Chicago Health Equity Quest. And this is part of our initiatives through the Parkinson School of Health Sciences and Public Health and our Center for Health Innovation and Entrepreneurship to really spur innovation within our community. And so this is an annual event. Last year was our inaugural challenge, and every year we have a different focus, a different theme. And so this year we're excited to focus on that intersection of climate change and health equity. And so this is our challenge statement for this year. How might we empower communities with innovative solutions to address health disparities and climate change? And so whether you are here in person or joining us live stream, I really want the audience to really kind of use this discussion panel that we just wrapped up to really kind of get those creative juices flowing. And this is a nationwide call for applications to source innovative solutions. But I know a lot of us are local here to Chicago, so I really want to encourage, the solutions that come that are homegrown solutions as well. So this year, a little bit of a different focus in how we approach our innovation challenge, and we are dividing the challenge opportunity up into two tracks. One is sustainable health delivery, the other is health effects of climate change. And so as you're thinking of potential innovative solutions, they might fall into either one of these buckets, or it could be both. And so we encourage you to submit solutions through our submittable platform, and we'll help guide, coach, and kind of mentor teams that do submit. So who can apply? We are asking US-based companies, and so providing US-based solutions, freestanding solutions, and you must be an existing startup. So it has to be a registered company, and you might be thinking, oh, well, I don't have that. Well, here's your opportunity to get started in that and really be able to, think about what it means to add to that economy of small businesses here in Chicago and nationwide. So what are the benefits of participation? First of all, definitely just being part of this community of Matter and public health and healthcare delivery solutions through the Loyola University, and being able to have that comfortable space where you can articulate solutions, learn from peers, partners, and mentors of Loyola and Matter's ecosystem. Participate in roughly a 2-week period of time, which we are referring to as an incubator sprint that includes mentoring, workshops, and pitch practice opportunities with experts in the ecosystem. Up to 3 organizations, I know this is the key point for many people, will receive a 6-month Matter Global membership, and there is prize money involved. So it's up to $75,000 in prize money to be split by the 3 final winners. So what's the timeline? The application portal or period has already opened a few weeks ago. We're moving into wrapping that up by the end of September, and then we'll move into picking our finalists, going through the sprint opportunity I mentioned, and then the final pitch day is going to be toward the end of October, on October 27th. And so this is kind of a fast and furious approach to kickstarting innovation, and that's what we want to see. But we want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable and knowing that you have that community and support to guide you throughout the whole process. So if you're interested in learning more, definitely reach out to any of us on the Matter team or within the Parkinson School and the Center for Health Innovation and Entrepreneurship with questions directly. Email Loyola@matter.health. Thank you so much.